Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T, and if true crime is your jam, and like me, you enjoy delving into unsolved cases, trying to figure out who done it, please consider subscribing. Also, if you find value in my content, please do me a favor and hit that like button. According to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons Database, or NamUs, more than 600,000 people go missing each year in the United States. Luckily, the vast majority of missing persons cases are quickly resolved. Nationwide, there are 6.5 missing persons for every 100,000 people. 2 people who will be tallied in the 2022 missing persons number, if they're not found by the end of the year, are Dylan Rounds and Aidan Clune. Oddly enough, the 2 young men are the same age, 19, although Dylan has since turned 20. Each has brown hair and brown eyes, and they both disappeared about 50 miles away from the town of Wells, Nevada, but 50 miles in opposite directions, so they actually disappeared about 161 miles from one another. Dylan disappeared from Lucin in Box Elder County, Utah, and Aiden vanished from Curry, Nevada in Elko County, Nevada. Dylan Rounds, in case you don't know, is the young man who vanished on Saturday, May 28th from his farm in the remote desert town of Lucin. Despite these similarities and many people's wild speculations, Dylan's case is believed to be unrelated to Aiden's, and as we go through Aiden's case, you'll see why that is. Aidan Jerome Clune, who was born and raised in Sonoma, California, vanished on April 28, 2022, exactly 1 month before Dylan Rounds. But sadly, Aiden's disappearance has received much less attention. Likely, that's because Dylan's disappearance has been ruled foul play, while Aiden's disappearance appears to be the result of a blossoming mental health issue. The sad reality of missing persons cases is that some get tons of attention for whatever reason, while others are left in the shadows to quietly grow cold. For the families whose missing loved ones' stories are mostly ignored, heartbreak is accompanied by an overwhelming sense of helplessness and desperation. Aiden's mother, Amy Clune, has been battling to get her son's face and the circumstances of his disappearance out into the ether. It sounds like she's pretty much on her own in this war, and it's clear she could use some help, so that's why I'm covering this case. My hope is that this humble video will help get the news out about Aiden, and that people who live near the area where Aiden vanished can go out and help look for him. While it's likely Aiden may be deceased at this point, it's still important for his mother to get answers and have a chance to take her son home to California. Speaking of Aiden, let me tell you about him. Let's start with a physical description. He's 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighs about 125 pounds. He has brown, soulful eyes and a thick mop of dark brown hair. It's semi-long in the front, shorter in the back, and it may have been dyed black. Aiden has 2 tattoos, including a yellow and green Oakland A's logo on his ankle and a large tattoo of his own design on his right side. It's a large centipede with 2 eyes formed out of ants above it. Moving on to the heart of Aiden's character. His mother, Amy Clune, describes her son as a very creative person. He started playing guitar in the 4th grade, and as he finessed his strumming skills, he became more and more interested in pursuing a career in music. Aiden's ultimate dream was to become a songwriter and producer. Round about leaving middle school and starting high school, Aiden began to suffer bouts of depression. Seeing her son struggle, Amy looked for a therapist, someone Aiden could perhaps see on a weekly basis, but her insurance company wasn't able at first to offer Aiden one-on-one therapy, and Aiden understandably rejected the idea of group therapy. Aiden kept pushing forward despite the persistent dark clouds of depression. He had a small circle of friends in high school with whom he was tight, and they likely diverted his attention away from the blues. Aiden was doing well in school up until the COVID-19 pandemic struck. As it did with so many people, the pandemic affected his mental health in a bad way. The isolation, the remote learning, the not hanging out with his friends. Aiden was so down at times that Amy couldn't wake him up in the morning to get him over to his computer for his online classes. Adding to Aiden's struggle was a painful breakup with a girl he cared about deeply. The weight of these two significant events pushed young Aiden further into darkness and despair. Unfortunately, because so many people were suddenly struggling with their mental health, it became even harder to track down an affordable and available therapist. At one point, when Amy found herself banging up against walls in all directions and her own frustration was at a breaking point, she called the local ER, screaming, crying, and pleading for help. And that finally did the trick. Aiden got in to see an older male therapist who, after just 2 sessions, told the 19-year-old that he seemed okay and that he didn't need any additional therapy. In essence, the therapist fired Aiden. Once again, he was drifting into dark waters without a guide. By sheer grit, Aiden managed to graduate high school. Through it all, he worked at a grocery store in Glen Ellen, California, which is just outside of Sonoma. With his friendly nature and perfect pearly white smile, Aiden was popular with both the customers and his coworkers. He was a consummate professional at putting on a happy face for the world and tucking in all his emotional pain. Aiden worked throughout the pandemic, making enough money to buy himself a truck. Having wheels and money for gas meant he could go on a long road trip, something that would later prove tragic. At some point, Aiden decided that he needed to make more money. He landed a job at Dutch Bros, working in one of those coffee kiosks. Apparently the pay was a lot better than at the grocery store in Glen Ellen, but Aiden quickly discovered that working in what is basically a small sardine can for humans was not a picnic, especially when the lines outside were long and tensions inside that can were frayed. Adding to Aiden's anxiety was another employee who took a dislike to him and began targeting Aiden, trying to get him fired. This employee even went to management and falsely accused Aiden of a serious infraction. Management figured out that the accusation was unfounded, but Aiden found it impossible to stay in that small can with this scheming person, so he quit. Suffering silently with depression, combined with an upsetting event like that, didn't do anything to help Aiden feel better. It was another chip out of his troubled soul. At this point, Aiden felt that he needed to get out of Sonoma. He'd visited his uncle and cousin the summer before in Vancouver, and he loved it there. He and this cousin, a former Marine who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, had talked about getting a place together. By the end of February, the decision was made, and Aiden and his mom began getting him ready for the move to Vancouver. Amy helped Aiden by buying him all the things a young person needs when they move out for the first time into their own apartment. Dishes, bathroom supplies, furniture, and so on. It was during the first week of March 2022 that Aiden set out in his truck, loaded up with all his new things to make the drive to Vancouver. It was an epic journey just to get him to this point. Amy was thrilled because she thought that Aiden was finally truly happy and on a path to realizing his dreams. She was thinking, he wants to make music, and there's tons of people there with music connections. He's out on his own. Good things are happening for him. But 10 days after moving in with his cousin, Aiden called his mom in the middle of the night, frantic and afraid. She could actually hear Aiden shaking on the other end of the phone. Suddenly, he was terrified of his cousin. Amy found this hard to believe because she knows her nephew, but she took Aiden on his word, and she knew that her nephew suffered from PTSD. Whatever happened, Aiden ends up moving out and he heads over to his uncle's house. But within 3 days, Aiden calls Amy again. And this time he starts accusing his uncle of all sorts of bad things. Amy hasn't said what those accusations were, but Aiden's uncle is her brother, so she knew at this point that all these things that Aiden was saying couldn't possibly be true. It was just too much. Now she began wondering what's wrong with Aiden. She'd never heard her son talk like that before. As he did with his cousin, Aiden promptly leaves his uncle's house, and he now heads over to the house of one of his cousin's friends, a guy he didn't know very well, and the guy didn't know him very well either. So this guy ends up calling Amy and asking her to tell him about Aiden. He expresses to Amy that he himself is going through a lot, and he wants to make sure that Aiden is an honest person and that he isn't going to rob him. Amy reassures him that Aiden is not one to steal and that he's a very good person. But then this guy floors her with another question. He asks if Aiden has any mental health issues. Amy tells him about Aiden's breakup and his bouts with depression. But it's becoming increasingly clear that something is really wrong with Aiden's mental state. This is more than depression. Amy also notices that Aiden's burning through his tax return monies. He seems to be buying things impulsively, and at the rate he's going to be without funds soon. Next, Aiden tells his mother that he's going to get his own apartment in Vancouver. Knowing that he isn't in a position to rent and pay for his own place, Amy talks Aiden into coming back home to Sonoma. Once home, Aiden appears to be relieved. He tells his mother that he slept the best he has in a long time because he's not afraid at home. She encourages him to take a break, to not just run out and get another job, but rather to relax, spend some time outside in the sun, maybe walk on the grass barefoot and feel the earth, go to the beach, look at the ocean. Basically, she wants Aiden to chill out. And this is California, after all, where people are pretty much known for being into Zen things, meditation, yoga, earthing or grounding, which refers to walking barefoot on the ground. Amy believes that if Aiden can just quiet down his brain and calm his spirit, he'll feel better and stop having all this anxiety. But Aiden is holding secrets. He's not telling his mom everything that's going on in his life. He gets into a car accident while driving a friend to a doctor's appointment, and he only tells his mom about it when an injury to his back gets so bad that he needs medical care. She's like, Aiden, you need to tell me about these things when they happen so that I can help you. So while Amy is sort of a helicopter mom who wants to be there to help her child whenever he needs her, Aiden sort of rejects that, and he wants to handle things independently. After about 3 weeks back at home, Aiden starts looking for a job. He decides that he wants to work at the Sonoma market in town, but he has reservations about it because there's a person working there whose best friend worked at that Dutch Bros. Surely this person will know all about the drama that went down there with that other employee. But this grocery store pays better than Dutch Bros, And Amy tells Aiden not to worry about that person. Maybe she tells him that once this person gets to know him, he'll see what a nice person Aiden is. So Aiden goes for it despite his reservations, and he gets the job. But as he's training for the position, he starts to display personality changes at home. Suddenly, he has a short fuse. He's quick to anger. Amy has described him at this point as being out of control and combative, but she puts it down to his anxiety. He's also becoming paranoid about pretty much everyone around him. He isn't hallucinating, but he's becoming increasingly distrustful, and he's worrying nonstop. Even his friends are noticing this, and they later will tell Amy that after Aiden returned from Vancouver, he was a different person. He started spinning benign situations into nefarious plots. Amy broaches the subject of antidepressants with Aiden, but he refuses to even consider them. Amy then calls Aiden's primary doctor, and she begs him to call Aiden and tell him to come in. But the doctor tells Amy that there's nothing he can do if Aiden won't come in on his own accord. He can't force a 19-year-old to come in for an office visit. On Saturday, April 23rd, 2022, after that period of training, Aiden works his first day at the Sonoma market. When Amy gets home that day, she's excited to hear how his first day went. She's surprised to find him sitting silently in his bedroom with the lights off and the drapes pulled shut. Aiden's upset, and he tells her something bad happened at work, and he doesn't want to go back there. Seeing how disturbed he is, she tells him it's okay to quit, that he shouldn't feel bad about it, things will be okay. Aiden writes up a letter of resignation and plans to hand it in the next day. Once again, seeing that Aiden is not right, Amy looks for a therapist that they can afford. She finds one with a sliding scale, and she plans to talk to Aiden about it within the next day or two. On Sunday, April 24th, Aiden goes to work and hands over his letter of resignation. That Sunday night, as Aiden and Amy are at home, Aiden is restless and unable to relax. The buzz of Aiden's phone announces a text message. After reading the text, Aiden becomes visibly upset, and he tells his mom that he has to leave and get out of town for a few days. He tells her that it's not safe at their home and that she should lock the door after he leaves and not open it for anyone. Amy asks him, "What's wrong? What's going on?" Aiden just keeps saying, "It's not safe." Amy desperately tries to reassure her son and convince him that home is a safe place and that he should stay there. She asks Aiden if he will go and see the therapist that she's just found, and Aiden agrees, but he's still insisting that he has to leave for a few days. He goes into his bedroom and grabs a few items of clothing, just enough for a couple of days. He tells Amy that he's either going to his friend's house or his dad's house. Amy tells him that if he's going to go to his father's house, he should give him a heads up because he won't be expecting him. A little later, Aiden calls his mom to say that he's at Bodega Bay. Bodega Bay is a small village in Sonoma on the ocean, and it's always been Aiden's and Amy's happy place. Amy will later find out that Aiden was not telling her the truth when he said he was at Bodega Bay. Instead, he was just down the block at a relative's house. The relative doesn't call Amy to tell her that Aiden is there and that he's acting strangely. Aiden ends up leaving the relative's house that night, and then he drives 21.5 miles up to Santa Rosa, where he spends the night in a park, sleeping in his truck. That was the one thing Amy had told her son not to do, and he promised her that he wouldn't. Lies, secrets, a troubled mind full of anxiety, fear, and confusion. Aiden is about to set out for a road trip from hell. The next day, on Monday, April 25th, Amy calls and texts Aiden, but he's blocked her. It isn't until around 10:30 a.m. that she's finally able to get through. Aiden answers by saying, "Oh, I haven't heard from you." And Amy's like, "Aiden, you know that I've been trying to reach you all morning." She even sends him screenshots of all her text messages. Aiden admits that he didn't go to his dad's house the night before. He tells her that everyone is kicking him out of Sonoma. Amy replies, "No, that's not true. I'm not kicking you out. Please come home. Where are you?" But Aiden keeps playing games and he won't tell her his whereabouts. Around noon, Aiden calls his mom and says, "Guess what? I'm going to Utah to stay with Grandma Debbie." Amy then calls Debbie and her husband Mike. I'm assuming Debbie is Aiden's paternal grandmother and Mike is her second husband. Amy explains to them what's been going on with Aiden, and they agree that he should come to their home in Utah. Everyone's happy with the plan, and things are seemingly on the right path. Aiden can stay at his Grandma Debbie's place all summer. Amy's feeling relieved after so much chaos. That evening, Aiden stays at a Motel 6 in Reno, Nevada. He spends the night texting a lot of people. He's texting his friends from the first grocery store that he worked at. He texts a friend that he got into an argument with and says, "Hey, we're good." The friends make up. The next day, Tuesday, April 26th, Aiden wakes up and checks out of the motel. He talks to his mom on the phone and he says he's still planning to stay at Grandma Debbie's and Mike's in Utah. He drives all day and he seems happy when he talks to his mom at various points along the way. But as the day goes on, Amy notices that Aiden's becoming more and more paranoid. He tells her that he's changed his mind about going to Grandma Debbie's. Amy says, "Please go and just meet up with them." Aiden agrees to that. Finally, Aiden meets up with his grandpa Mike and one of Mike's friends at a speedway in Sugar Hill, Utah. Aiden wants his grandpa Mike to get into the truck with him for the drive over to their house. Mike agrees and he gets into Aiden's truck. Immediately, Aiden tells Grandpa Mike that they're going to go to Washington. And Mike replies, "No, I don't want to go to Washington today, but maybe we can plan something for another time." Mike feels that Aiden is about to grab his phone from him, and when he jerks away and is upset, Aiden gets mad. He pulls the truck over to the side of the road, and he kicks his grandpa Mike out on the side of the highway, and he drives away, abandoning him there. Grandma Debbie later calls Amy and she's livid. She tells Amy that Aiden tried to kidnap Mike. And it's at that moment when Amy knew that she needed to call the police and have them find Aiden right away. It was clear that her son needed a mandatory lockdown in a psych ward. Amy calls the Utah police and the Utah Highway Patrol, and she explains the problem. They go out, but they don't find Aiden. Unbeknownst to Amy and the Utah police, Aiden is driving to Park City. From there, he drives west on Highway 80, but at some point he suddenly turns around and starts driving in the other direction. Amy has access to Aiden's bank account, and she monitors it throughout the day. She notices that Aiden stops at a Chevron station in Wendover, Nevada around 8:30 p.m., where he fills his truck with gas and withdraws $200 from an ATM. Amy will later find out that Aiden was caught on CCTV there, wearing a gray hoodie under his coat. Aiden then drives for another hour. At 9:30 p.m., he stops at another Motel 6, this time in Wells, Nevada, where he spends the night. It's important to note at this point that Aiden's mother is emphatic that Aiden doesn't know anyone in Nevada and he didn't know Dylan Rounds. Apparently, a lot of people have been speculating that there could be some connection between the two young men. Amy says absolutely not. That night, Aiden speaks to Amy on the phone. He's exhausted and he asks his mother to read to him. All night and well into the morning, mother and son continually text and talk on the phone. The last time Amy speaks to Aiden is around 12:31 a.m. He's having trouble falling asleep. He's concerned about the inner suite door in his room. Amy tells him to just check it and make sure it's locked. Finally, Aiden tells her he's really tired and that he needs to go to sleep. Amy says, "Okay, but call me as soon as you get up." Both mother and son are exhausted on this night and early morning. Both are emotionally wrecked. The next morning, on Wednesday, April 27th, Amy wakes up around 5 a.m. She wants to check on Aiden, but she refrains from doing so. She doesn't want to wake him up. When she can't hold herself back any longer, she dials his number. But Aiden doesn't pick up, and he's blocked her again. She then calls all the authorities in the area, Wendover, West Wendover, Elko County, and she asks them to check all the casinos and gas stations in the area, and they do. No Aiden. Amy later finds out that Aiden checked out of the motel at 6:23 a.m. He got back into his truck, and he headed south on U.S. Highway 93. At mile marker 23, Aiden suddenly pulled over and parked his truck on the shoulder of the highway. He got out of his truck and began walking toward the Cherry Creek mountain range, west of Curry, Nevada. Aiden left the door to his truck wide open. All of his belongings, including his wallet and a duffel bag, are inside and clearly visible. At 8:15 a.m., a rancher and his employee notice Aiden. They watch as he goes back and forth between his truck and the hillside leading to the Cherry Creek mountain range. At some point, Aiden keeps walking toward the mountain range and he doesn't turn back. At 8:50 a.m., Nevada State Patrol troopers come across Aiden's abandoned truck. The door is still wide open. Seeing all the belongings inside, they decide to shut the door and lock the truck. The patrol troopers leave the truck as is, and they don't bother to run the California license plates to see whose truck it is. The troopers notice the driver's footprints on the ground, but they don't bother following the tracks. They don't even walk a couple of yards. Instead, they simply leave the truck and go along their merry way. They don't even write it up. Aiden's mother is deeply upset that these troopers failed her and Aiden that day. She'd already notified the authorities in Elko County, so they would have known if those troopers had reported the incident that it was Aiden's truck and that he was in serious danger due to his deteriorating mental health. Back in Sonoma, Amy is going through agony, wondering where Aiden is and what's going on. He doesn't call her, and he still has her blocked on his phone. Each hour is its own little torture. Only a mother can understand the emotional roller coaster ride that Amy was on. The next day, on Thursday, April 28th, the Elko County Sheriff's Office learns of the abandoned truck. A search begins for Aiden. The police follow his footprints for more than 10 miles. Oddly, the cops notice a pattern wherein Aiden walks in his shoes for a distance, then he removes his shoes and runs barefoot for a while. He repeats this behavior all along the route. Seeing no additional footprints next to Aiden's, the police are certain that Aiden is traveling alone. Beyond the 10-mile mark, Aiden's footprints melt into the dirt and are no longer traceable. That is when Aiden vanishes into thin air. Aidan Clune has not called his mother or used his debit or credit cards since that day. If you enjoyed this video, if you find value in the content, and if you want to support the channel, you can now do so through a monthly membership, and you can also make a donation right down there in the comments. If you have information regarding the disappearance of Aidan Clune, please call the Elko County Sheriff's Department at 775-738-3421. And if you live in the area where he disappeared, please consider searching for him.